Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
Where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kinds of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AA Podcast. This is Ashley Olson.
And I'm Andrea Crane.
Andrea sounds a little better today,
Little bit.
or this week. If you didn't catch last week's episode, she was pretty miserable.
Oh,
So
man.
way to power through.
Yeah. I still sound like a prepubescent boy.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But it's fine.
It's
Everything's
getting
fine.
better. It's getting better.
Yes.
Everything is fine.
Yes. And before we get started on this week's episode, we are going to share our weekly Bible verse, and mine is coming from Isaiah 40:31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint.
That is one of my favorite verses in the
Mine
whole
too.
book. Yeah. Okay, and mine is 2 Corinthians 12:10. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
That's awesome. I love it.
Mhm. All right. Well, Ashley, okay, before we get started today, I just have to, ever the gardener, I have to throw something out. So we're recording this on November 16th, so we are pre-Thanksgiving. And the snow is starting to fly. You've had snow, right?
Oh,
You've
yeah.
had crazy snow.
Yeah, we had like
I
16
saw
inches last
videos.
week.
That is nuts.
Total.
Okay. So, okay, out in Idaho, we have not.
Mm.
We might have a few flakes on Sunday, but it is starting to get cold. But I just want to let you guys know, if you have any thoughts about planting garlic, now is the time. I know people don't think about gardening stuff at this time of the year, but I literally just ordered my garlic. And in Idaho, the rules are a little weird about ordering and planting garlic. You have to order very specific garlics because there are diseases that go around, and we're trying to keep the garlic crops safe here in Idaho. So in your state, there may not be those kinds of restrictions, but I would encourage you to go out as long as the ground is workable, as long as you can get a shovel in it, like a hand trowel usually, then you can still plant garlic. And there's no other time that you can plant it. It has to be done like the year before. I have heard of people in other zones planting it like January, but I wouldn't push it. So go ahead and order your garlic. I'm planning on getting mine into the ground tomorrow because I think we're going to get frozen within the next few days. We're supposed to hit lows in the 24s to 26 range.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's going to be pretty chilly, but I can still very easily work the ground. And so I thought I was too late to get garlic in, but I am not. And it just came today. And so I'm going to get it in the ground tomorrow. So fortunately, I will have garlic next year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the growing time for that?
Mm.
So when would you
So
harvest it?
so let's see. The past couple years that I've grown it, I have gotten it in the ground. Sometime in the fall. Never this late, but sometime in the fall, and then you harvest around June. So or even early July. You will get garlic scapes. Those are those curly things that I
Mhm.
harvest. Depending on if you plant hardneck or softneck garlic. Hardneck garlic are the ones that make the scapes. So that's why I make sure that I plant some of those. You also want to plant softneck because that's the kind that will last you all winter long.
Mm.
Hardneck will not stay all winter. It kind of rots before the winter is past. But you harvest June or July, I would say, depending on your zone.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yes. So
Well,
get the garlic in the ground.
take note.
Mm-hmm.
So today we are going to continue our conversation on strength training. So last episode we deep dived, I think it was
Mm-hmm.
like an hour episode,
It was. It was awesome.
on RPE, and how to push yourself in the gym. So we talked
Mhm.
about um, progressive overload training, and then we're going to talk about strength training versus hypertrophy training,
Mhm.
which, when I first started, I just assumed it was all the same. And so for our listeners, and I think for our broad audience demographic, you probably are just doing maybe just what you would assume is just strength training.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so we can get more specific with our training, just like with the progressive overload. So if you didn't already, go back to last week's episode, take some notes on progressive overload. It's
Mhm.
truly a game changer when it comes to your weight training and your progress that you're going to be making in the gym.
Mhm.
So if you're struggling and you're like, I've been working out for X number of years and I just don't feel like I've ever made progress, then progressive overload is probably something that you're not incorporating in your training program. So,
Yeah, and actually I ask this question all the time in clinic. Like how much weight are you lifting? How long have you been at that weight? How
yep.
many reps do you do? When you get
Mhm.
to the end of a set, do you still feel like you could do many, many more reps? Um, and if so, you need to progressively overload.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I talked about how I don't think I specifically said this, and I wanted to say this in this episode was your last set with your last reps should be insanely hard. Like,
Mhm.
and we're going to get into when that's appropriate, but when you're doing especially strength training based, which we'll get into what that means. I'm sorry, when we're getting into hypertrophy training, that last set and those last reps should be insanely hard. Like RP 9, 10. So
And if you
if you
don't know
don't,
what RPE means, go back and listen to the last one.
exactly. So let's just break it down. So hypertrophy training. So the primary goal of hypertrophy training is to increase the size of your muscle and your muscle cells. So
Mhm.
you might be listening as a female and you're like, that doesn't sound like something I want to do because I don't want to get big and bulky.
Mhm.
Well, as a woman, it is you can percentage wise grow as much muscle mass as men, but it does not look the same
Mm-mm.
because
No.
we don't have the hormones that men have to be able to grow that big. So
Right.
when I say the percentage is the same or relatively the same, that does not look the same. Like we are just skeletally, we are just built completely different.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when I say increase your muscle size or your muscle cells, that is just literally in a calmer and more gentle way of putting it. We're increasing our lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, well, I want to get sculpted and toned, that means building more muscle.
Right.
And so the main goal of hypertrophy training is to increase that lean muscle mass, basically.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
in this idea of recomposition, right? Changing the
Hmm.
shape of your body, because trophic, the word or the root word trophic literally means shape or form, and
Yes.
hyper shape or form. This is a change in the shape or the form of the musculature. And so, I talk about recomposition all the time with patients that, they want to look a certain way, but what they don't know is the way that you want to look, those ladies that look like what you want to look like, the reason they look like that is because of lean muscle mass, because they've got so much lean muscle mass.
Hmm.
That's what the appealing look is.
Yes, agreed. Um, and so when we're hypertrophy training, we're working through a ton of different movement patterns, a variety of rep ranges. And then what I got to earlier is we're really trying to fatigue that muscle. So again, nothing is individual. This
Mm.
hypertrophy training has to also be coupled with proper nutrition in order to
Mhm.
be able
Right.
to properly restore and build those muscles. So we have to have enough protein to be able to even support this kind of training. So,
Right.
we're working through a variety of movement patterns. Think honestly, think row workouts, think bodybuilder workouts. So we're working through rep ranges between 8 and 12. We're working to high level fatigue, like I already said,
Mhm.
and we're working through a lot of like typical movements like a chest fly, a back fly,
Mhm.
a shoulder press, maybe with dumbbells instead of a barbell. We're working on maybe some leg curls or leg
Mhm.
extensions. We're working on um, some face pulls with the cable machine, triceps, biceps. So we're working a ton of different muscle groups and we're working those in that rep range between 8 and 12. And
Mhm.
if you're truly practicing progressive overload, then we're working to a higher level of fatigue. So our main goal with hypertrophy training is to create a stimulus with the muscles. So we are trying to create as much control and stimulus as much as possible. And what you're probably like, what
Mhm.
does stimulus mean? And that is just the intended physical and mental challenge of a workout. So last week we talked about how you can challenge yourself in progressive overload. And we went through like 10 ways that you can do that. So this is creating a stimulus with those muscles. So with hypertrophy training, because our goal is to build lean muscle mass, then the stimulus should be, and the goal should be of the stimulus to grow more lean muscle mass.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Cool. And then also with hypertrophy training, we're also working different angles of the muscles. So instead of just doing a flat bench press, now we're doing maybe incline or decline, low
Mhm.
incline, and hitting different angles of those pectoral muscles. Maybe instead of just a typical standing um, lateral raise, now we're doing a leaning lateral raise, or maybe we're
Mhm.
even doing a different variation, or maybe a different range of motion with a lateral raise.
Yeah, so just to give you a visual picture of what she's talking about. So thinking about a lateral raise, I want you to think about standing up straight and tall. You've got your arms at your sides. So a lateral raise is just you've got a dumbbell in one hand and you're just going to raise your arm up to where it is parallel to the ground. All right. So literally your arm is sticking straight out to your side.
Mm-hmm.
You can also do front raises, right? Where
Yep.
you raise your arm up in front of you. Um, Now, that is a completely different movement if you lean. So you
Yes.
can lean your body out by think about
It's about
let's
about a 45-degree angle. So
yeah.
you're holding onto something steady, obviously,
Mhm.
and you're
You're
leaning your body
right.
out. So feet are closer to the point of
Like
where
you're
you're
holding
holding.
on to like a door handle or something like that and then you're leaning your body out sideways.
Hmm.
And then doing the lateral raise. That is a different movement
Yep.
and it's a even changing up the angle, for instance, an overhead press, that's a much different movement than sitting on an incline bench and doing an overhead press.
Yep.
So yeah, just and if this is all a little mind numbing, go on YouTube. I tell patients to do this all the time. There's so many great exercises because I'm not a trainer, I'm not an exercise programmer, and that's not really what I'm paid to do in my job, but it's such a key piece to my job. So
Hmm.
very often I will tell people, listen, go out to YouTube, look up this and this and this, and then you'll come up with so many different exercises that are possible around this one like muscle movement or groups of muscles.
Yes.
You tell people
And
to do
also,
that too?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm programming for them, I provide that for them.
Right, right, of
But
course.
if they don't know, then I'd literally just
Mhm.
direct them to YouTube because there's some great videos out
Yeah. Yeah, there
there.
really are.
Yeah, and there's, like, certain people that I really like Brett
Mm,
Contreras is an amazing
mhm.
one. He has
Yeah.
really great videos for not only just the glutes, but, upper body as well. Uh, and then
Mhm.
his sidekick that will usually be in his videos, her name is Ashley, but I don't remember her last name. You can probably find
Hmm.
her via his YouTube page, but she also posts a lot of great um, tutorials, videos as well. So, yeah. And if you have any questions on whether or not somebody is performing the exercise well, you could always just shoot us a message
Mhm.
and we'd be like, "Yeah, that's not somebody that
Yeah.
I would recommend to be following," or,
That
"Oh my gosh, that's an amazing person."
yes.
Yeah,
Yes, there are some questionables for sure.
yeah, so with hypertrophy training, think about very isolated exercises. So, we already just mentioned shoulder press, chest press. You can think leg curl, leg
Mhm.
extensions. Those are extremely very specific exercises.
Mhm.
Um, Probably a little less compound because, or when they are compound movements, they're not for true strength or power. They're more for just overall like shaping up, like Andrea said, the recomposition piece. So if you're doing a deadlift, you're probably not
Mhm.
going extremely heavy or finding your 1 rep max. You're probably still working in that eight. You are still working in that 8 to 12 rep range. So
Mhm.
higher level of fatigue because of the higher reps. And we joke all the time, like anything past 5, honestly, anything
Cardio.
past 3 is cardio. So,
Mhm.
you're definitely getting that heart rate up, you're really fatiguing the body, the CNS is
Mhm.
definitely taxed. Um, and so then some pros of hypertrophy training is actually because it's a lower risk of injury, because you're not going to max weight all the time, for low reps. So you're not doing a 1 rep max with hypertrophy training. You're working in that 8 to 12 rep range. So there's a lower risk of injury. But at the same time, the con, I would say, is like you don't know what your true potential is as far as, like, say, a deadlift or a squat or a bench because you're
Mhm.
not focusing on that. But it's not because it's a bad thing or it's anything. It's just that's not the goal of hypertrophy training.
Mhm. Yeah, and just to I guess just to clarify, um hypertrophy training. So Ashley's talking about like this 8 to 12 reps, and you're not going as heavy as you possibly can. Like you want to be in that 8 to 12 rep range, and you're going to do multiple sets. And the purpose of this is not to get to that one heaviest rep that you can possibly do. It's not to set your personal records.
Right.
However, you also can fall into a rut of like doing the same weight over and over and over and over again. And then you're not getting anywhere. Not only you're not completing the goal of hypertrophy, but you're also not getting any stronger. And you're also not getting any favorable improvements from a compound lift if you're
Mhm.
never increasing the intensity or the weight or, you know, things like that. So that's why it's really important to um, understand what we were saying, what Ashley was saying in the previous episode about, perceived exertion, and that kind of thing, because you should be getting better. And people seem to intuitively understand this with cardio exercise, but not with weight training. And I
Mhm.
see this over and over again where cardio, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I get on the treadmill and, 6 months ago I was doing this incline and now I'm able to do this incline. So they understand progressive overload when it comes to cardiovascular activity, but it just seems to be a different mind muscle when we're talking about strength training or weightlifting, weight bearing
Yeah.
activity.
And I think a lot of it comes, from what my experiences with clients is that fear of being injured.
Mm,
And then secondly, and not nearly as much anymore, but that fear of getting too bulky.
oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. And I'm gonna once we go through strength training, I'm gonna kind of come back and talk about like how you can program so you have
That's
both
awesome.
best of both
Mhm.
both worlds. So hypertrophy training, just a little breakdown. increase the size of your muscles or your muscle cells. You're at a high level of fatigue. You're working in that 8 to 12 rep ranges. We're working very isolated muscles. We're working different angles of those muscles, lower risk of injury, and not necessarily focusing on that 1 rep max. So, we're going to transition over to strength training. So, I want you to think with strength training, this is basically like your powerlifting um, group of individuals. We are focusing on the increased amount of force that your muscle can exert. So, we're thinking explosive, big power output um, movements. So, if you're a power lifter, those movements are squat, bench, and deadlift. So, those are our three main lifts that we're focusing on. If you're a power lifter, you also have the snatch and the clean and jerk. And so, you're thinking very explosive,
Olympic.
big Olympic lifts.
Mhm.
Yes. So, how much power can you create in lifting it from point A to point B? And so, that is the definition of strength training. So we are usually working in that 1 to 6 rep ranges. So very low, very heavy weights. We are not trying to work to extreme fatigue. We are actually wanting to maintain as much energy as possible. We're taking a lot bigger rest breaks, which we talked about in the last episode. So
That
strength
must be
trainers,
me.
yeah, strength trainers, powerlifters, we are definitely sorry, I said powerlifters, but, I also meant
You meant
weightlifters.
yeah.
Yes. So we're working we're trying to be very, uh, conservative with our energy output because we are gearing up for that next big output, that explosive output, and we won't be able to do that if we're working those high level of fatigue on those muscle
Mhm,
groups.
mhm,
So again, we're working very low rep ranges, we're working very big weights. So obviously the con to this is that there are higher levels of injury risk. But at the same time, the pro in that regard is just the opposite of what the one for hypertrophy is. You know your 1 rep max. You know what you're capable of doing.
mhm,
And so we're um we're not necessarily doing a ton of accessories. If you see like a power lifter or weightlifters programming, they probably are working on more like stability type exercises. So probably some farmer carries, some shoulder stability exercises, like a farmer carry with an overhead press instead of like just
mhm.
beside the legs. If you don't know what a farmer carry is, you're basically holding weight, and you can do them bilateral or
Mhm.
unilateral, depending on what your goal or maybe
It's like
your weakness is.
it's like carrying 1 or 2 heavy suitcases through the airport.
Exactly. Back in the day when we didn't have
Mhm.
rollers.
Right.
So um, we're not doing a ton of different angles of bench. So, we're not necessarily focusing on incline bench. We are literally just wanting to focus on that movement that's going to get us on the platform to perform our best, right? So, again, we're not trying to fatigue the muscles as much. We're wanting to figure out how we can create the most power with those main movements. Um, and then, big thing too is improving strength. When we're trying to improve strength performance, it relies a lot on the neural adaptations as well as the structural adaptations to the muscles, tendons, and other tissues um, that
Mm,
are required for those lifts, right? So if you're like, what does that mean? So um, think of like for neural adaptations, it's an increase in strength without noticeable muscle growth. So
mm,
you might see a power lifter and you're just like, holy crap, they don't actually look that strong. I don't
mhm.
even know if they lift. Um,
My
and
my kids call that a sleeper build.
yeah, and it's because they're working in those lower rep ranges, so they're
Mhm,
not fatiguing those muscles in order for that stimulus to
mhm,
grow. So the stimulus for strength training is literally that power output, not so the you might have seen somebody at the gym and they have insane like lean muscle, like they look like they could lift a house. Um, and then you look and see what weights they're using, and they're not using that heavy. Like they're not really doing those big compound lifts. They're doing like what we've talked about, those
Mhm.
more isometric exercises. And so you're kind of like, "Oh, I bet they could deadlift a lot." And you would put them in front of like a deadlift bar and they might be lucky if they pulled 135. Um, that's just not how they are training, and so they're not built for that strength piece.
Mhm. It's
So
just different goals.
it's totally different goals.
Mhm.
Um, and so and as far as the structural adaptation, yes, it can lead to increased muscle strength and power, but it doesn't mean that it's going to build more lean muscle mass.
Mhm.
So, um obviously we're with both of them, you just have specific goals. So with strength training, like I said, your main goal is how can you create that much power. With hypertrophy training, we're focused on that lean muscle mass. So something that I have gotten comments about, like, especially when somebody asked me what I do for a living, and I'll say personal trainer, I do weight training, and they're like, "Oh, cool, yeah, I do weight training too." And I was like, "Oh, awesome, what do you do?" And they'll say, "I do Pilates."
No.
And I'm just like, "Oh, no, that's not strength training." So
It's training. It
it
is a
is
type of
training,
training.
and it is
Mhm.
amazing. It can be a massive complement to weight-bearing
Yeah.
exercise,
Mhm.
especially for that core strength, that
Right.
flexibility, the mobility, body awareness. I
Mhm.
actually have so, um, I haven't announced it on here, Andrea, but
Oh,
literally 2 weeks ago, I opened up my own gym.
you haven't announced that on here. It's just been all over your socials, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 2 weeks ago, I opened up my own studio gym here in Evergreen,
Woohoo!
Colorado, and, so I've been meeting a lot of new faces and,
And it is
um
gorgeous.
yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
But I have a lot of ladies that are wanting to get into weight-bearing exercise, but their background is Pilates or yoga. And I tell them, I'm like, "Honestly, I love introducing, Pilates and yogis to weight training because their body awareness
Mhm.
is amazing. I can give them the slightest cues and they immediately respond because they have that body awareness already
They
built
know
in
where
and
they are in
founded.
space.
Yes.
Mhm.
Like, I literally say, "You guys literally know you have 2 feet, and they both can work together," whereas some people come in and they don't even know they have 2 feet.
Mhm.
And it's like, "Do you even know that you have a body?" Like,
Right.
I
Right.
don't even know if you know how to use it.
Mm. There
Um,
is 5 feet underneath your neck that
yes.
is moving around. Yeah.
Exactly. So I
Mhm.
do love when Pilates and yogi Pilates and I don't even know what the so it's a yogi and a
Pilater?
Plotter? I have no idea.
No
Please
clue.
message us if,
Yeah,
you know
we don't know.
what that is, but, I love it when people from a Pilates or yoga background come to weight training because
Mhm.
they have a very good foundation, and that core breath, the
Oh,
bracing,
yeah.
oh, it's
Yeah.
huge. They understand it,
Yeah.
just really clicks. Um, okay, so with both of these, with hypertrophy and with strength training, the amount of adaptation that your body can produce is literally based on the volume, frequency, and intensity of the training, as well as genetics.
Mhm.
Some people just were blessed with being able to grow lean muscle mass in certain areas of their body. Like my friend Kate, she has insane arms. Um, but
Mm,
it's like she has a harder time growing lean muscle mass in her legs. She's
mm.
freaking powerful. She can squat more
Yeah,
than
she is.
me, and she weighs way less than me. She can squat over double her body weight,
Wow,
and deadlift double over her body weight, and
that's
bench
amazing.
at least almost double her body weight. So she's
Good
insane.
heavens.
Like
Mm,
she is a powerhouse, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of her muscles are extremely lean. Like she has a very lean
mhm,
upper body, but she'll tell you she just can't grow as well in her lower body. And
mm,
granted, her focus is strength training and not hypertrophy training necessarily on her lower
mhm,
half, because she still is a competing as a power lifter. And then also like the types of exercises that you're doing is going to influence that adaptation too. So, somebody might respond really well to just doing a flat bench, some bicep curls, triceps, and their muscles just grow. Like
mhm,
they have a really good stimulus from that. Whereas some people might have to work a little bit harder and be a little bit more creative in being able to grow those areas. So genetics plays a big role in those 2, right?
yeah,
So kind of mentioning earlier, if you're listening to this as a female, um, we do not grow muscle as much muscle as a man, just because we don't have those
mhm,
hormones. But like I said, you can still grow relatively the same amount of percentage as a
mhm.
male. It's just gonna look a lot different.
Well,
Um,
they have literally, like, 100 times, like, 2 orders of magnitude more testosterone than females do, and that's
yep,
what's growing that muscle. Mhm,
yep, exactly. So, um, how I train for my clients is kind of a little mixture of the two. I want them to get comfortable with lifting heavier, but when somebody is first starting out, I am most definitely working in that hypertrophy rep range. We're going a little lighter weight that's comfortable for them to get the form down, but we're still progressing because one, they probably started from zero. So
mhm,
like I said in last week's episode, you're going to naturally have progressive overload with that. But we're still working in those like 8 to 12 rep ranges. And because, most of my clients that come to me new, they don't have a training background. So I want to, as much as possible, avoid all risk of injury.
mhm,
Um, just because well, we don't want injuries even if we are an experienced lifter, but you don't want to scare somebody off, right? But
mhm,
also, most women that come to train with me, they are wanting their goal is literally to quote unquote tone up and look better and lose the body fat. And the best way that you're going to be able to do that is through hypertrophy training. So when I'm programming, so for example, let me actually just pull this up real fast. In my small group, for my ladies, let me get it up. Um, So, for example, this month, come on Mondays, we are doing a drop set. So, I think we mentioned it last week what a drop set is, but basically, we'll start with the first set is 8 reps, and then the next set is 5 reps, and then the next set is 3 reps. So, we're progressively going down in reps, but we're going up in weight.
mhm,
And we're doing a barbell hip thrust, a military press with the barbell. We're doing a glute dominant step up, a supinated pull down, a banded leg curl, and then like an ab exercise. So the barbell and the military press in that specific exercise would be more of a strength training movement that I have programmed, whereas the rest of the exercise for those days would be more hypertrophy training.
mhm,
So I do a little bit of a combo for my girls that are a little more familiar with weight training. Like the second day, we're doing squats and bench press. Again, we're doing that 8-5-3 step down in reps, but we're increasing our load. So reps is not very many. And so for you to have a RP9, you're having to go relatively heavy to what you can lift.
Mhm.
So for a barbell squat at 3 reps, after doing 8 and 5 reps, for me, that might look like 185, 200. Actually, no, sorry. That would be, I just did it last week. It was like 205 I did for 3 reps after I did 8 and 5. So going relatively heavy on those last ones, and by rep 3 of those last 3, it should be a grind. Like, it should be
Mhm.
a real grind. And then the rest of that exercise, for that day is some chin-ups, some landmine deadlifts, some abductions with just the band, and another core exercise. So again, I'm kind of combining that strength piece with that hypertrophy piece.
Mhm.
So you can do both. However, if your goal is powerlifting, do not do both. Like, you need to make sure that you're conserving those energy, and that you're truly focusing on those core lifts for your competition. But if you're an everyday lifter like myself, um, you can
Mhm.
definitely combine them, and you can focus on body recomposition and building that lean muscle mass, but still pushing yourself with those heavier lifts.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's what I'm doing these days too, is
Yeah.
I do a mix.
Yep. So, still a little higher risk of injury, as Andrea knows, but relatively on the
Yep.
lower side.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. Do you have any questions, or do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I just think this is really good information. It's kinda like a prep class on, eventually getting to how do people, do this for themselves, right? Like, how do they operationalize this? And you can't operationalize something until you know definitions and terms and know what your goals are. I mean, I think a lot of times when women, I say for better for worse, probably more for worse. Women really don't do a lot with weights historically, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we'll kind of dabble with machines, but a lot of women go into a gym and kind of look around and I don't even know where to start here. And I would have said the same thing before I met Ashley. I didn't have any idea. I mean, I just go get on a treadmill and walk and hate life for, 30 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And not really know what else to do. So yeah, I think there's a whole change in the zeitgeist in terms of what women are um, wanting these days. I always ask about activity, like, what's your favorite activity to do? How do you get exercise? How do you move your body? And more often than not, though, my patients will say either they'll say, I currently am weightlifting, or I know I should be weightlifting. I'm just not sure what to do. So it's like we're there in terms of the consciousness to know that this is something we should be doing. But then a lot of people don't know where to go from there. So I
Yes.
think this is fantastic information.
And if you're listening to this and you are the latter one where you're like, I know I should be lifting, and
Hmm.
all these terms and definitions now freak you out because you're just like, this is Greek to me. I would need to listen to these episodes multiple times to even try to remotely get it. One, go back and listen to both of them again.
Hmm.
And then I would recommend going out to YouTube and getting a visual. I am a very visual learner.
Yeah,
And
I am too.
so go to YouTube, look up hypertrophy training versus strength training. And I know because I looked this up,
Hmm.
there are videos out there that will break it down for you. And that way you have a visual representation of what we're talking about.
Hmm.
And again, just like with nutrition, it just takes practice. It's going to take some failure. You might, if you're at a public gym, you might get some people that feel like they need to give you some free advice. Just smile, say thank you, and just move on. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
don't feel inferior to that. Like, they, one, should not have the business to be commenting on anything that you're doing. But if they do and they feel the need, then, just, and maybe there are some people that legitimately have some great advice,
Yeah.
and so take it, practice it if it feels like it's something that is legitimate,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then be a better lifter because of it. Just
Yeah.
because somebody makes a comment, sometimes it truly is out of the goodness of their heart and not
Yeah.
out of ill intent.
Mhm.
And so once you're in the gym, I say probably 9 out of 10 times people there have no clue that you exist because they are focusing on them,
Mhm.
and they also think everybody is looking at them. So
Right.
they're even more self-conscious and thinking about themselves. And so
Yeah.
they don't even know you're in the room. And then 9 out of 10, they are just so happy to have other people in the gym that want to
Mhm.
lift. And so it's a great community. Um, but it just takes taking yourself out of your own comfort zone. So taking you away from the machines and the cardio machines and getting you into those into the weight training zone.
Mhm.
So um
Yeah,
I think
and I have had so my experience, so I belong to I mean it's a bodybuilding slash powerlifting gym, right? Isn't
yep,
that how you would classify it? It's pretty old
there
school.
yes, there's some massive dudes in there
There's
and some
some
very
massive,
massive,
yeah.
well, actually very fit, lean
Yeah.
females in there.
Yeah. No,
Um,
they're crazy, crazy strong people in there. Bodybuilders, competitive lifters. And but I can tell you, like I walk in there and I mean, I'm in my 50s and I don't do this for a living. I've got a day job and I'm yeah, so I don't fit the
mold.
aesthetic, yeah,
Yes.
of this place. However, I feel so comfortable in there, and everybody is so, so nice, and I've had men come over and women complain about this sometimes. I sometimes think there are certain personality types just looking for something to complain about,
Oh,
but
for sure.
anyway, I've had men come over and say, "Hey, I noticed this or this. I think if you did this, you might find this an easier lift for you or whatever." And they have been so helpful. I mean, these are people who really know what they're doing and have looked at something that I'm doing and saw a moment where they could help. And they have helped. And I'm always so grateful for it. And they almost look apologetic when they come over, like they really had to think about whether whether they wanted to intrude in my workout or whatever, but I'm always so grateful that they did because I mean I appreciate it when someone takes the time to share their expertise with me. So yeah, I've
Yeah.
had great experiences.
Yeah. And yeah, just like what you said. Like you might we're all stuck in our ways at some point. And
Mhm.
so for somebody to have, that's why having a coach, why having a trainer that
Mhm.
has eyes on you can be, or that you're sending videos to if it's online,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
so um powerful and valuable because they
Mhm.
can be like, "Hey, y- your form isn't something." I say this to my clients. Your form isn't something that I would be like, "Oh my gosh, stop right now. You're going to
Mhm.
kill yourself or hurt yourself very bad." It's not it's honestly fine. But here is some things that you might be able to tweak or
Yep.
think about differently while doing the movement to
Yeah.
make it that much better, and then your stimulus is going to improve.
Right.
So, and you can see straight leg deadlift or deadlifts is one that even squats, I would say probably all the compound movements, honestly. There's certain
Yeah.
cues that I'll say to somebody lifting, and I'll be like, think about this. And that maybe didn't click, but then I'll say
Mhm.
something else. And all of a sudden the light bulb goes off
Right.
and you can see when they go through the movement, like, it was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, that was
Mhm.
it." And so I was like,
Mhm.
"Did you feel the difference?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, yes. Like I actually feel like I'm getting a better response with my muscles and I can feel it better."
Right.
And so it's not that they were necessarily doing it incorrectly, but they just improved it that much. And that
Yeah.
again is a practice of progressive overload.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
so, well, awesome. I don't think we need to labor this topic anymore. I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
But if you are listening and you do have questions, or you're just like, oh my gosh, this just kind of reaffirms the fact that I need somebody. Maybe I'm a good fit for you, or maybe you have really specific goals like powerlifting, and I would definitely refer you to somebody that might have a little more expertise than myself. I do have powerlifting expertise, obviously, but
Yeah, you
um,
do.
there are some amazing coaches out there that may be a better fit depending on your level. So reach out if you have any questions. We would love to try to get you the right fit and get you going. That is the
Mhm.
biggest thing, is just get you started and get you way more comfortable. So our contact information is in the show notes below, and we love hearing from you. So definitely reach out to us, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Bye. The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.